all the churches that you know, the COVID experience has caused probably a reduction in numbers. I know we've found a place or two where the older people all stayed home during COVID, and guess where they are? They're still at home because they turned the screen on and there it is. Probably all services. About the only exception will be holidays. On Easter, we have a lot of people. Mother's Day, a lot of people. And that's wonderful. But where are those people on the rest of the Sundays? Church on the internet has made it a bit easy for a lot of people. How many of you experienced staying home or being somewhere during this church was ever closed any Sundays?
A few weeks.
I know we met with my daughter's family on the internet from the church there. In a sense, they were getting their religion on the TV. We use that term like that. But now, the philosophers and some of the theorists out there are talking about why churches are not doing well, and they say, well, we're having women at work, people work longer hours, and all these kind of things. They try to explain. They said, well, we've got sports on TV, and we do. And what's unusual, sometimes those sports events happen right at church time. I don't know whether it's good or bad. I know some churches during some of the special events move their service so their members could honestly be at church and do the other thing as well. The theorists are really wrong. The people making those judgments are not Christians. They're trained in universities that teach atheism. It's found in Cookville, it's found everywhere else. Did you know that's the same universities where our teachers have to go and be trained under teachers like that? And we even have one or more atheists teaching in our schools in Clay County. That's unusual. You know that Jesus and the apostles never talked about the election, the economy. One of the few times Jesus said, render to Caesar what's Caesar's, and to God what's God. And guess what? God made Caesar as well, and all that Caesar had. The real issues of life are almost the same as 2,000 years ago. People are living in sin. You can't make it much simpler. Living in sin. And they need to be redeemed, to be bought. Jesus gave his lifeblood for their salvation. We need the same salvation that they taught. Then maybe our church buildings will be more filled up with saved and active people. How can we get back to the scriptures? The Apostle Paul had a very interesting comment. He didn't have to fool with computers, by the way. And he was better educated than most of us. What he said in 2 Corinthians was, he says, you know what's on mind? The care of the churches. I don't believe he talked, look how about he was treated The only time he had demanded when he says, I was born free, when they were trying to talk about how they bought their freedom, he did demand that, but that was true. That was why he could do what he could do. He was free. We can get back to the scriptures by doing what they did. And let's look at their 4 things right here. Number 1, preach the word. I'm not going to read all these scriptures, but here they are. Romans 1, 2 Timothy 2. Isaiah 61, it talks about preaching way back under 2,700 years ago. But they all talk about presenting the church. Paul taught a long sermon in synagogue at Antioch, that's recorded in Acts 14. These are important scriptures because this is what preaching is. It was the public presentation of the gospel, presented by someone who could present it. And Paul, it seemed Paul's greatest weakness may have been his eyesight, because he talked about what large letters he had written. But he was the one that says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. Remember that in Romans? And we should not be. These scriptures you might want to keep in mind, or we can share them another way. Let me tell you what's happening in public. I have books by some of these people. They are good writers. They are, I guess you'd say, good people. But I have a book of Billy Graham's wife. But can you imagine that Charles Stanley, when he died, was receiving a salary of $500,000? Joel Osteen not only makes $200,000, but is worth $100 million. We need to let that soak in. That might affect what they're preaching. Osteen's congregation is 45,000 members, meeting in 6 different time periods. Charles Stanley had a congregation of 16,000. They've got good books, I've read them, but the Bible is not money. It's a teaching of Jesus. I listen to some of those sermons, and if they're not talking about the plan of salvation or the organization of the church, it makes some really good inspirational lessons. But when a person, you have to weed out part of what they say, it's better to listen to somebody else. And here's one of the problems they have. The plan of salvation is usually believe or pray the sinner's prayer. And I think Joel Osteen says that things will always be better tomorrow. What did Paul talk about? The gospel of Jesus Christ. Let's look now from the public preaching. Here's something all of us may be able to participate in. And I notice a lot of misprints. My computer doesn't spell very well. Spell check hidden. Maybe you'll understand what we're talking about. Teaching begins in the cradle. Mother's love enduring. If a man has bad language, he will not use it with mama. Think about it. I've witnessed that a lot of times. Somebody's language, but he won't deal with her because mama has made that influence out there. And that love goes on and on. It goes on after she's dead, too. We each depend on that. Sunday schools have a wonderful effect, and we have teachers here. Remember our card classes? I remember Remote Grove and May White taught me. That was in the old building below the church a long time ago. She was a wonderful teacher. In the church in Glasgow, Scotland, we talked to people. The church was new, and by the way, it looked like a prison. It was stone, they had windows way up top, trying to prevent people throwing rocks through them. And those people said, you know what, we had it really good in the Sunday school and the public school where people could feel at home. Is it possible people don't come here because it's a church building? There was a time years ago we had tent meetings and we reached some people that way. We need to make people come so they can also come here, but you know, they're converted somewhere else. I've heard these preachers talk about how many people they baptized and converted, and they didn't remember that was done by the teaching, by the neighbors and the family and the Sunday school teachers and all those people, and they don't need to claim credit for what somebody else did. I want to fuss at those preachers for doing that. By the way, we borrowed our Sunday school from the Salvation Army, and the regularity of those lessons is effective. Can you imagine? We get about 40 minutes here once a week, and they get 7 hours in the schools 5 days a week. You may not believe it, but back when I first started teaching in Springs, I taught a Bible class, 2 semesters. It is still a subject that can be taught by a certified teacher. I don't know whether anybody's doing it or not. It can be taught in the schools. Some people complain that I did that. Now let's talk about another most effective. The Apostle Paul said in Colossians, teaching and admonishing one another, and what was in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. Many times a good song service far eclipses the effect of the preaching service because you can all participate. I've been a few places where people sing about like what we call an outhouse soprano. And I tried to ignore it because that woman and man were singing to the Lord. But we sing to each other too, because Paul says teaching ourselves. Dale, some of these lessons that was a while ago about reviving here was the best songs we've had in years because what it said, revive us. And we need to do that. I hope a little of this is happening right now. The Apostle Paul taught on the riverbank. I think that's where Lydia was converted. He taught in people's schools and workshops, in the prisons and private homes and the letters. And I think if you live here at a time, you probably use radio, TV, the internet, newspapers, and any media. He could. I don't know about Facebook. Possibly. But can you imagine how slow it was to do the things he did and how well he succeeded by trusting the Lord and living the life he did? 2 of the better teachers I've had in preparation for preaching, I want to mention 2 names. You probably don't know either one of them. At Oak Grove, we had a preacher named Walter Neal. I don't remember his sermons, but he took time to tell us how to read in public, speak clearly, be prepared. He taught us how to present the Lord's Supper very well. He taught us how to make announcements, how to make public prayers, even prayer lessons. And to this day, I give him thanks for some of the leadership things he shared with us. He wasn't a good preacher. He was a profound teacher. I also had Batsell Baxter. He used to do a program called Herald of Truth on TV. And he taught us more things about preaching. But primarily he taught us the content. You teach the Bible. You teach it every time, in every way. He taught us also how to conduct ourselves. He even said, some young preachers may get called out for a meeting, and some woman's out there, he says, you better be prepared to take care of yourself. He was a good language preacher. I think we got a little more. The Apostle Paul taught on the mountain in Athens. It's called Areopagus or Mars Hill. Preached a wonderful lesson about the real God. He taught in homes of Christians, such as in Acts 16, Lydia's house. He taught in prison. In fact, he wrote several of his letters from the prison. But in Philippi, he was chained to the wall. In the night, midnight, guess what? They were singing praises. And God miraculously released them, and he was able to convert the prisoner's household. He taught real often from house to house, and we should too. Let's think of some of the ways we can do. We have opportunities in our church classes, in vacation Bible schools, sometimes in public singing that goes from is a teaching device. Very good device. We could put up booths at fairs, people do, we should. There's all sorts of contacts from telephones and emails. How about contacts gained when we go to funerals and other places where we find opportunity because we know people need the Lord, and sometimes in those times they even know they need the Lord. I say that because in Memphis we were selling cemetery lots. You know where we got our referrals? At funerals. Now you talk about taking advantage of people. But if we do it for the Lord, they won't regret it. We will need it. Now, I know door knocking sounds like you do it in the city. But there are people within 5 miles of here that we could knock on their doors and tell them why we're there. Not only invite them to services, but ask them if they got religious questions. And sometimes they do. Sometimes they come here and ask religious questions, and they do. Especially houses where people used to be here. We sing a song, Seeking the Lost. And some of them have been found and lost again. Okay, we've talked about preach. Not everyone preaches. I was preaching in another congregation, and somebody talked about this other person says, he can't preach. I think they were a bit prejudicial, but they're almost right, because he could not conduct himself and present it effectively. That's important. If we can't speak loud enough to be heard, or with clear language. Now, I've been to churches where people use what we call $10 words. You know what I'm talking about? They preach sort of over your head. We need to keep that in mind as well. We need to teach anywhere and everywhere we can, and our reach is as far as we can get. I'm guessing that within 5 miles of here, there are 100 people who are not going to church anywhere today or next week. We have opportunities. That's our reach, is what's out there today. A few people are trained to preach. We all can teach, and some people teach very effectively, as we've talked about here. And for those teachers you and I have had who passed on, we want to thank them. Brother, Sister Irish taught here, and others who passed on. Remember them as well. And there's no limit with today's technology. You could be converting people in North Carolina if you know them and can talk to them. In just a minute, we're going to talk about an invitation song. We don't usually close a lesson without an invitation. On Pentecost, they did. They interrupted the sermon. I wish that would happen sometime in my experience. People says, preacher quit. What do I need to do? That's what they told Paul. Today, if you need to become a Christian, the invitation of the Lord, not ours, not this church, the invitation of the Lord, He said, come to me and I'll give you rest. Would you come?